Hello, this is going to be a hopefully quick tutorial on how I import new weapons and, in a roundabout way, any kind of new model to Elden Ring. Um, I have been asked by a couple people now to make a kind of tutorial on how I do it, but I should kind of preface this with the fact that I kind of started this using Scrub Milk's tutorial series. He has an excellent series and is where I got started. So if this video leaves you with any questions, I would certainly recommend checking out his tutorial series and in general checking out his tutorial series. It's a very good and comprehensive set of tutorials that will certainly get you started in more things than this tutorial will be able to do. However, the purpose of this tutorial is more to show my workflow, because that is more what people have asked about. So, to begin with, I'll quickly make sure we're all on the same playing field, so to say, and talk about the programs that I use. I obviously use Blender. I use Mod Engine 2, as you really should be if you're messing around with mods with Elden Ring. I use UXM to unpack my game files, which certainly helps in getting the information and files that you need. It helps with... You should unpack your files. I use Yabba to unpack parts BND, well, any BND archive, which is incredibly useful. I will put all the links to these programs in the description, obviously. I use FLVER editor to edit the FLVER files. Bounding box patch here, very helpful. Recalculates the bounding box and stops weapons from disappearing, mainly fixing a few collision problems, I guess, as well. And then I use Yapt to edit the regulation bin. Okay, so for this tutorial, the example I'm going to give is I'm going to create a model swap for the Mace of Molag Bal from Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and then I'm going to make it a standalone weapon and show how I do both of those. To begin, I'm going to find a base. So I'm going to open I have my tutorial mod engine folder here. In mod, in parts, I am going to find my list of weapons. The Mace of Molag Bal is, funnily enough, a mace, so a good base would be the mace. And here you can see it is part file 802. So, if I go into the game part file, scroll down to 802 and copy that into my mod part file, I now have a pretty good base to start with. What I'm going to do now is get my shortcuts up. I definitely recommend getting a file, or maybe putting them on your desktop, a bunch of shortcuts for the programs that you use most, because I've set DCX to always be opened by Yabba, but you will need to drag and drop folders onto Yabba, onto FLVER editor, onto bounding box patch calculator, for example. So I would definitely recommend getting your shortcuts set up. I'm going to open Mace, go inside. This is going to be a model swap, so we don't need to rename anything, as the Mace is what we are going to replace. Inside, what I want is the original Mace model, and to get that, you drop the FLVER onto Bloodborne Model Ripper, and then in the actual Bloodborne model ripping program file, you will see there is an SMD file of the same name as the FLVER. That is very important, because now in Blender I can import source engine files, SMD. I believe this is a plugin, but I will link that in the description. Go into my Bloodborne Model Ripper file, find 802, and there we go. The model is imported, as well as the skeleton. So, now that we have the model, we can import our own model. I have prepared mine before Molag Mace. The scaling is a bit much, but that's just how it is. Something to note with some models, I noticed this with every model that comes from Skyrim. They have, you can see this area is all black, whereas this area is textured correctly. I believe this is just a dirt or blood layer, maybe both, because there's two. To get rid of that, you simply go into edit mode, make sure all is selected by hitting A, push F3, and type in separate by material. This will also separate a sheath if the weapon has one. I'm not going to be adding a sheath to the weapon, in Elden Ring at least, so I can delete these three. And now I am left with the base Mace of Molag Bal model without any extra, any extra mesh on top of it. So now I'm going to line the model up. Hopefully, you know at least the very basics in Blender and how to transform your objects. Sometimes it might be necessary to, modify the weapons in order to better fit. Like this handle, for example. I'm not going to change how the character holds their weapon. it is much easier to just make sure the weapon takes up the same handle space as other weapons. Yeah, once it is aligned, make sure to apply all transforms, and then to get this model ready, we are going to add a modifier in this little blue wrench section. Click add modifier, add an armature, and then select the object to be the skeleton of the weapon that we are replacing. Once that is done, click the new weapon, then the old weapon. That's the order of that is important, while holding control, so that the old weapon is a brighter yellow compared to the new weapon's orange. Then go to Object, Link Transfer Data, Transfer Mesh Data, Vertex Groups, and then select all layers. And then click off of it, and that's done. This is a very similar process to how you would get armor ready. The only difference is that if I go into weight painting mode, weapons are a lot simpler. So there's only really one vertex group, and it's the weapon. It's all the weapon. So it's very easy to add these in comparison. I will add some footage in while I'm talking about, just showing how an armor piece, because it covers the entire body, has a lot more vertex groups that need to be considered, and so weight painting is definitely important when it comes to armor. However, for weapons, you're pretty much done. All you have to do now is delete the original mesh, and I like to rename the new one. To the same name as the old one, if I'm replacing it. That's even more important, I guess. Now I'm going to save as a blend file, so just in case I need to come back. Call it Molag. And then, more importantly, I'm going to export as FBX. Okay, now the model is ready. I'm going to need to get the textures up quickly, as that's the next step. Alright, so in the case of Skyrim, the weapon textures are already in DDS, which is good, because DDS is the format that Elden Ring uses, but they're not quite usable by Elden Ring. I have Photoshop open, and I have the textures here, these three. I have a albedo, metallic, and normal texture. We will have to do a little bit of work to get these textures ready for Elden Ring, so I usually throw them straight into Photoshop. I like to load transparency as an alpha channel when I'm importing them. It just makes things look nicer, I think. Alright, so if you have looked at textures from software games before, you might notice that their normal textures are yellowy, very kind of gross looking, in my opinion. But that doesn't matter. My kind of solution to get these things working is, I think I saw this in a Scrub Milk video. So, again, another recommendation to his tutorials. They're very good. Simply take the blue channel, copy that, and paste that into the blue channel of the normal texture. And now the normal texture looks ready. It looks very similar to the ones that you'd find in Elden Ring itself. On top of that, this one may not be necessary for your textures, but if you were going to bring textures over from the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, I would recommend going into levels and bringing the far right down to 150, because the textures are a bit dark for Elden Ring, typically, I've found. Anyway, that's all the work the textures really need, unless there's something specific about your texture set. This should be fine for most of them. So we can just go ahead and save them. I'm going to save as, and then I'm going to find in the tutorial folder mod parts. We'll go into our unpacked mace folder, and then in the unpacked TPF folder, we're going to replace _A for albedo. That's your normal color texture, and it's going to be saved as Intel TextureWorks DDS. There is also another add-on for Photoshop that is just normal DDS. I will be honest, I don't know the difference. Sometimes this one works better, and sometimes this one works better. I don't know. But for this one, you can set presets, which I'll show you now. My albedo preset is this, so feel free to pause and copy it if you need. Then we can do the same for metal. This time replacing the _M. Here is the metal preset I use. Again, feel free to pause. And once again, for the normal texture. Here is my normal preset, or Norma as I have written it here. Alright, so now that our textures and model are ready, we can drag the texture folder onto Yabba. This will make a new TPF and back up the old one, which I'm going to go ahead and delete. And we can take the original FLVER, drop it onto the editor, and what I like to do when I am doing a model swap rather than a new weapon is go into mesh, click all for select delete, and delete face sets only. This will keep bones and everything in place from the original weapon, which in some cases is very helpful, because say the skeleton changed in some way for whatever reason while you were importing it, this should help mitigate errors related to that. So click modify, and now you can see the original model is gone from the file. Now we will import our own model. Which we prepared earlier. I have molag.fbx. You should see the amount of materials that you'd set for it. If you see extra, you might need to remove extra meshes, like I mentioned earlier with the potential blood and dirt mesh that was on top of this. Anyway, this looks quite good. Modify that to save it. And now to add the textures to the weapon, we go into material. We have the original material, which we're going to ignore. And then we have the new material added by the FBX that we imported under the same name as the FBX file. Go to edit. Now, if you are using a template FLVER, this might look different to you, but if you are using a base game FLVER and have just removed the face set, this will look the same. And you can see each of these has albedo, normal, albedo, metallic, and all you do is simply click browse. We find our folder, so we go back into our mod engine folder, and we go back into our folder that we're editing in, back into TPF, and A stands for albedo, normal stands for N, and M is obviously metallic. So you just go through and do all of these. Some templates I have seen have extra diffuse layers. In those cases, you'll have to have, diffuse textures ready. But in the standard game, this is what it looks like. Click OK, click modify, and now we can close the editor. Now, I'm going to delete the backup and go back into our parts folder. And I'm going to drag the root folder for the weapon back onto Yabba. And then, now that you can see it's made a backup of the old one, I'm going to drag this onto bounding box patch calculator. And delete the backup. Now hopefully, if I go into tutorial and launch Elden Ring, I load my character. And put the mace, which we replaced. There we go. The model has gone in correctly. You can see extending the handle was quite a good idea, I think. And the textures look pretty damn good, I think. And if all you're looking for is a model swap, that's all you have to do. From here on out, it'll just be information on adding new standalone weapons. Okay, so this part is all about making a standalone weapon rather than a model swap. There is probably better ways to do this, but this is how I do it, and it's definitely quite a manual method, I would say. Um, Again, another reminder to go check out Scrub Milk's tutorial series. It's very comprehensive on things that I may miss in this one. So, um, first thing that we should do is look at the game part files. We have 802, which is the mace, but if we're adding a new model, we need to find a gap. I just so happen to know that there is a huge gap in the 3000s. There are only 8 taken up, so I usually go for 3500 if it's just something I'm testing. So, I'm going to go for 3500. As you can see here, I've already made a part file for it. What I did to do this was I just copied 802 and then renamed it. It's as simple as that. Now that it's here, we can unpack it. First thing we should do is open up this Yabba XML. I'm going to open it with Notepad++, and you can see when it repacks it, it's going to be looking for 802. So I'm simply going to replace 802 with 3500 and replace all. Save. And then we can continue through. We want to replace this with 3500. And then we want to rename these with the ID 3500. When we open TPF, there's another Yabba XML. Again, the name has 3500 because we've already changed the name, but it is looking for 802s. We want to replace that with 3500. Alright, so we've already done the textures in the previous one. So if we just delete these, go into 802, go all the way through to here, grab the Molag Bal's mace textures, bring them to 3500, put them in the TPF folder. We can simply rename these as well. Getting the textures ready is very much the same when you're making a standalone model. But now we're going to get the model ready, the model itself, and this is a little different. I have the mace imported here, just like last time, but before I import the Molag Bal mace model, I'm going to rename everything in here except for this mesh. So I'm going to rename the skeleton is the main thing. I don't want the imported skeleton to match the mace skeleton in case there are any skeleton edits later on. I believe changing the name of the skeleton in this will have that effect. So I do it every time. Now that I've renamed these, I import my model. And rename that. Now it's very much the same as last time. Scale it down. Rotate it. Scale it up a bit. I'm going to separate material. delete these three as they are unneeded. I'm going to grab the end, stretch it out to say there. Grab this, scale it on the Y. Move it over. Okay. And I might scale this up a little bit more. There we go. Now, apply all transforms just like last time. And then, again, just like last time, add an armature, skeleton, select the old model, object, link, transfer, vertex groups, all layers, click. Now delete the old model, and we should have a new model connected to a skeleton that is named something different to the original skeleton, with all the vertex groups added. Now we can save this. I'm going to save it as Molag Standalone and export it again as Molag Standalone. That's really the only difference you have in Blender. Now we have both textures and the model ready. We can open this in FLVER editor, go into mesh, and this is a difference. When I delete, I don't select face sets only. I do want to affect bones and anything else. I want to clear out as much as I can from this FLVER. Save that. And now it is empty. There is still a skeleton in here, but I don't think it has any real effect. As you can see that up here, the original 4 bones are still in here. So, you know, it might all be superficial, but I think it's still a good practice. Anyway, now I import Molag Standalone. Go into material. I have the Molag Standalone material, and just like last time, I go into our weapon folder and line them all up. Just like that. Now, I just saved it. I'm going to drag and make sure that TPF is also saved. I'm going to delete both the backups. And then I'm going to pack up the parts BND, as well as put it in the bounding box patch calculator. Now, that's all fine. There were some differences getting the model ready, but the main difference with a standalone model is the regulation bin. If we go back to the root mods folder, we're going to have to go to our Elden Ring game folder and put in the regulation bin from the game. Then we're going to want to open Yapt, or I know people use DS Map Studio as well. Whichever one you like, both will allow you to edit the parameters. And we're going to find the tutorial, or in your case, not tutorial, regulation bin. Now, all weapons are defined in equip param weapon, and all armor is in equip param protector. If you want to add a new weapon, you have to add it here. This process, I personally find really tedious, and I've written my own script to do this for me. So my workflow doesn't actually include doing this, because in order to make a weapon, you need at least one row with, I think it's 262 parameters total. It's a lot of parameters that need changing. But if you want it to have affinities, such as if you want to be able to infuse it or change the Ash of War, you need to then add an extra 12. As you can see here, I'll have to zoom in on this, the IDs are kind of split after the end 4 numbers. So I don't know what this weapon is, but you can see it has Ash of War type allow change, which means the Ash of War can be changed. It has up to 25 upgrades, and more importantly, you can see the same weapon, because if you look at the first 4, it's 2110, has an extra 12 incrementing in the hundreds, which is needed to have it work correctly. Not all weapons have this, obviously. There are weapons that you can't change the Ash of War on. They are single lines in this. And that is why we are going to replace the Envoy's Horn, because it is a mace that you can't change the Ash of War on, and therefore you only need to duplicate one row. So what we are going to do is I'm going to open my weapon list. I am going to type in Envoy. The Envoy's Horn is right here. I need to find 1110. That's very easy. 1110. And as you can see, Ash of War type 0, prevent change. This weapon does not have 1200 increment lines behind it. But that's fine. So what we're going to do, as just a very basic way to add a weapon, is select this. We are going to duplicate row, and we are going to enter a row that is empty. I happen to know that 2500 is empty, and I'm going to name this Molag Mace. And now here, all the way down here, we have an entry called Molag Mace. And if we go into the right column here, we can go to Equip Model ID. This is the main one you'll want to change. And this number has to match this. So we want this to be 3500. Push enter, push save, and now the weapon exists in the game, which is all well and good, but when a weapon exists in the game, you need a way to access it. Otherwise, it's just extra data, really. So, for this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for shop lineup param. The values here are all correspondent to a merchant. They each have their own ranges, so most, I believe, have a range of 25 values. So 100, 500 is Kale, and he goes all the way up to 100, 525. The only way to change this is by editing, I believe, Talk BND. I've done it for my Skyrim weapon pack. I am considering uploading a pre-extended file so that if you wanted to make a weapon, for example, there could be, say, 100 values for each merchant, and it would give people space, because I had the problem of, I've got a weapon pack. It has a good few weapons in. I think it has 30 right now. That's impossible to fit into 25 lines, even if I remove all of everything Kale is already selling. So having an extended Talk B&D means that it helps. It would help people who don't really want to go through the hassle of finding out how. Just, put their weapon in. I don't know if I'll do that, though. Anyway. Sorry. A little rambly. Kale ends here, which means if we take this 100, 520 and duplicate it to 100, 521, name this cell Mola, that's fine. We now have a listing. I am going to set the reference ID. This has to be the ID in equip weapon param. So that's 500 for O's. This is something important. The sell price, well, the price that you buy it for has to be higher than the price you can sell it for. Otherwise, it won't appear in the shop. I don't know how much you sell the Envoy's Horn for. I'm going to guess it's not more than 10,000. Yeah, so, hopefully it'll appear. It's to stop, if you could buy something for 500 and sell it for 1,000, you could just infinite money. So, amount to sell, I always set to -1. I always set the quantity event flag as well to the reference ID, because usually that means it just points to nothing. And if two things have the same quantity event flag, what happens is if you buy one, it will lower the quantity of the other. So in this case, the amount to sell was -1 before. But if you copied, say, a weapon that is only sold once, like a weapon that you get from a remembrance, for example, you can only get one of those weapons. If you were to have the same quantity event flag ID, you would only be able to get one of those weapons and whatever you add, if that makes sense. Anyway, with the reference sell price quantity correct, the equipment type is weapon, and the currency is runes. I can save it. And now, if I load the tutorial mod engine, and we should be able to talk to Kale and buy something called goods name, or weapon name, sorry. Okay, so we are in, and we can see the mace is still Molag Bal. I didn't remove that file. That's still here. But if we go to Kale and purchase, he now has something that has the icon and sword art of the envoys.
Goodbye.
Buying one of these, we can equip the envoy's horn, and to show that they are different, we can equip weapons name. You can see the envoy horn remains in the game, and the one that we've just added is its own separate entity within the game file. Obviously, you might want to change some things about the some parameters around the weapon. I know that I'm going to be adding this into my mod pack, and I'm going to want to add special effects and things to it. But also, I don't know if that's very fitting for the maze. But yeah, this is how you add a new entity, give it a new model. I will say the weapon is just called weapon name with weapon caption. Those are very easy to change. You need to change the title and caption file to add a line with the ID. So in this case, 2500 with whatever you want to fill it with. The icon is a little bit more difficult to change, and I would definitely recommend, again, Scrub Milk's video on it. It is 100% better than anything I could do on icons. I'm not even going to attempt it. He also recently released a video that showcases a program that kind of automates the process. Definitely recommend that one as well. But yeah, that is my workflow near enough, ignoring the script that I use. I do, by the way, intend to sort of make this script more user-friendly. I kind of made it as a side project, and it's very messy, so I don't want to release it as is. But eventually, if I can get around to reprogramming it to be nicer, I'd be happy to release it, because it does make this a lot easier. Like, a lot less tedious. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this helps you. You know, if this helped you at all, I'm glad. If you have any questions, comment them. I'm sure I can get around to answering you. If you need any resources, make sure to check the description. I'm going to put everything I can remember in there. Everything that can help. That should be about it.